Today we're going to be learning about facial proportions and where to place certain features by doing these little miniature portraits. And this activity should really give you a good idea of if you are doing a drawing that's just freehand of a portrait, what steps you can follow to ensure that everything ends up being in the right spot. So I've got these two different worksheets on my desk. You can just decide which group of people you want to draw. And we're going to be using just a regular 2B graphite pencil for this entire activity. So one thing that's specific about how I designed this worksheet is you can see this circle is placed exactly in the same position as the one in the source photo, and the two are side by side. So you can take your pencil and measure over to see, like, oh, okay, this is where the chin should come to, the eye line should be across here. And it helps you understand how these guidelines are going to work rather than just knowing in general where to draw them. So the first thing that I'm going to do here, or where I like to begin, is sketching out where her chin is going to come to. So got a little line right there. I can double check to make sure that's about where it needs to be. Then from there, I'm going to start sketching out where this jawline is. So it comes down and meets. It's always an interesting thing seeing like the line of the jaw where it curves back in space and comes over. And then the same for over here, it's going to come across. And I'm just going to keep it nice and loose initially because we're just trying to guess about where these things are. We'll refine it later. So we have our face shape locked in. Next thing that I'm going to do is sketch out the lips. Now we'll notice here her head, the photo is taken a little bit from below, or she's tilting her head back slightly. So that is going to affect the placement of these shapes. So we can see her lips are right here along this line. And I think the best thing to do is just draw a guideline across horizontally. That's where that's going to go. Her nose is going to be right about here along this guideline. And then the eyes are going to come across the middle of the circle. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm drawing super light, so I can always go back in and erase if I need to. The next thing that I'd like to do before anything else is determine the placement of the eyes, because that's going to be the most important part. So one thing that you definitely need to know is eyes are always one eye distance apart. So what I mean by that is if we measure out this eye right here, we see, okay, it's about that much. We go over, it's going to be the exact same distance, or the width of the eye is going to be that width in between, and then the width of the next eye, and then maybe half of that over to like the edge of the face, but that can vary a bit. So first distance that I like to do is I estimate about what that's going to be for between. So in that, I'm establishing like this is going to be the eye distance. And then I just like to take my pencil and kind of measure that and go over and make a mark. I double check and see like, okay, is that about right? And it looks like it is. And so then I do the same thing on the other side, like this. And so now we have sketched out the slots for where those eyes are going to be placed. All right, real quick too, I'm going to sketch out these eyebrows here, or where those are going to go, just right along this line here. Check and make sure. Yeah, that should be good. All right, so it looks bad right now. You may be thinking that. You're like, what the heck is going on here? Once again, this is just the setup step to make sure everything is in the right place. So here as well, we can see the corners of the eyes if that comes down, it's gonna go right to the edge of the nose. And the same here, so we can have that space worked out. And then the corner of her lips are gonna go right, well, this one's a little bit different, but those are going to go right about here. Her head is tilted a little bit, so that's why this one is a little further on this side. Okay, so before we actually start going in and adding detail, this is what we wanna have. And it's kind of what you would wanna sketch out for any orientation of the portrait. But you can see here, the eyes are placed like smack dab in the middle of the head. The nose is like halfway between, you know, the eyes and the mouth. And then the mouth in this case is a little bit above that initial circle that you would sketch. That's above where this jawline goes, right here. Okay? So before I switch to the time lapse, I'm gonna give a couple more indications. I do want to show real quick how it is that we would sketch the individual features of like the eye, for instance. In this, I'm going to keep it very basic before adding the shading and just have a horizontal line and then one that's a little bit slanted, one that comes over here, and a curve at the bottom like that. And then our little iris on the inside. And since this is a very small portrait, that's going to be condensed to a smaller area. So I drew it a little bit darker than I normally would. I'm going to erase that slightly. And then, as I had mentioned, I'm going to just switch to the time lapse so that you can all see the entire process from start to finish of how I'm going to take it from this, the basic guidelines and things, to a finished mini portrait. Alright, so there's more detail and refinement that I could add, but I'm just going to leave it here for now, because since this is just a practice activity and I think I have the gist, the big thing I hope that you saw from this is it goes through a very strange phase, especially at first when you don't have as much context of the shading and everything, and it looks really weird or like not very good. Keep pushing through that and just trust that process until we can get something that all comes together. And it's really satisfying when you have one tiny little spot of shading that you add in and then suddenly that changes the way that you see the entire thing. So that is what we are going to practice with these other ones. We follow that same process for the profile and the 3/4. And hopefully this has given you a good idea of how this process is going to work in general. Thank you so much for watching.